Welcome to the 20th anniversary of the Contra Costa Watershed, Creek and Watershed Symposium. I am Elisa Robinson. I work for the Resource Conservation District, and I am your planner and organizer, and I kind of got you all here today, so thank you for coming. So we kicked off our planning for the symposium December of last year. So I've been in this mode for about a year now. And at the first meeting, one of the things that we decided to focus on were our themes. So artwork and how that influences conservation or vice versa. Technology and how that's changed over the 20 years that the symposium and the Watershed Forum have been around. And collaboration, because in watershed work, nothing happens in a bubble on an island. It's all with your partners and how you work together, because that is the nature of water. And these themes grew into a broader goal when we started thinking about how the symposium has impacted Contra Costa County and the legacy that it's had. So we wanted to be able to tell the story of the legacy of the Watershed Symposium and Forum, which have grown and developed together over the last 20 years. And I hope that you see these broader themes throughout our presentations today. And forgive me, I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so my voice goes in and out, so just bear with me. So our first speaker is Obi Kaufman, who I think we all know, and he's gonna look at a broader vision of where Contra Costa County is going and where our natural lands are going. And then we have Mitch Avalon, who's going to talk about the history of the symposium itself. And that's how we're kicking this symposium off. I'm going to introduce you to our wonderful MC for the day, Brendan Moran. And then we're going to have Supervisor Candace Anderson come up and do our welcome after Brendan. So I actually met Brendan a year ago. He works for Walnut Creek TV, at least that's one of his hats that he wears. And he did a video with the Walnut Creek Watershed Council to talk about arundo and the invasive species that they've been mapping throughout the entire watershed over the last couple of years. So he helped get the word out at our last event in October, which was called Creek Invaders. And so when we were looking for an MC, I knew somebody that was right here working in our watershed, and he has lots of experience helping to communicate our message with the public. So without further ado, Brendan Moran.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. Quick round of applause once again for Elisa, because we all know how hard she's worked to get us all here today. As she mentioned, I am the host of a local public affairs channel. Believe it or not, Walnut Creek has their own television station. So I was in the lobby back here looking around, and I have interviewed more than a handful of people here. So the rest of you are next. But I just wanted to sort of reiterate what Elisa was saying, that what was striking to me is that there are so many specialties of people who are here today. There's environmental scientists, there's people from the East Bay Regional Parks, there's the flood control, there's American Rivers, and there's more. And what's really cool today is we're gonna get a new twist, and that's art, right? We're gonna learn how art helps tell the story of our watershed, and we're gonna learn about technology. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And without further ado, I'm going to bring up Supervisor Candace Anderson. Please give her a round of applause.
Good morning, everybody. It is truly an honor to be here with you today on your 20th anniversary and to welcome you on behalf of the Board of Supervisors. This is our it's the California State Association of Counties Week, so most of my fellow supervisors are in San Francisco attending meetings, which I've been doing most of this week. And I'm, though, very happy to be here as the incoming chair of the Board of Supervisors and also as the District 2 representative, and so welcome to District 2. For those of you who don't follow follow the gerrymandering of our county supervisorial districts, I have the privilege of representing Orinda, Moraga, Lafayette, part of Walnut Creek, Danville, San Ramon, and Alamo. And after the 2020 census, we will be redistricting in 2021, and who knows what our districts will look like at that point. It is my pleasure also to welcome other public officials who are here today, and hopefully I have not missed anyone, but first from East Bay Regional Park, which of course is a strong supporter of this event and of this symposium. We have directors Dee Rosario, Beverly Lane, Colin Coffey, and Dennis Wasper, and I'm sorry I pronounced that wrong, but Dennis, are you here somewhere? Okay. Oh, he's supposed to be here. He will be here shortly. We also have Igor Skardov, who serves on LAFCO with me as well as with our Conservation Corps. And my good friend Bob Simmons, former mayor of Walnut Creek, who looks like he's sporting a little bit of a wound. Hopefully the other guy looks worse than you do, and all of the rest. I want to say how much I've enjoyed learning a little bit more about the history of this Watershed Forum. And all of you have at your tables the wonderful summary that I understand Mitch Avalon helped prepare, really detailing where did this come from? And if I could give it the 30-second elevator speech, it sort of sounded to me like we had a beautiful, beautiful community. Suddenly, hundreds of thousands of people moved here. Suddenly, they were in flood control areas. We needed to deal with flooding and needed to deal with issues that come with so many people living here. And the most efficient ways to get things done really were just coming in with a lot of concrete, cement, creating new waterways. People said, stop, we don't want to see that happen. And we all came together as a community and said, let's find a better way to do this. And let's find a way where we can maintain our natural habitats, ways that we can maintain the ecosystems that we have, while at the same time preserving property. And hopefully, as we continue to develop, do it in a thoughtful way that we won't have the same impact on our creeks, our rivers, our watersheds within Contra Costa County. I have been able to participate in just a very small way as we've dealt with the Arundo crisis. And down in my end of the county, in Alamo, we've had some great infestation of Arundo, and so it's been fun for me to get out with the community and get out there hacking up that horrible bamboo-like bush that grows very, very tall and trying to eradicate that from our creeks. But I want to thank all of you for what you were doing, for this great work that you're doing to really preserve our watershed, one of our most important features for so many reasons within Contra Costa County. So thank you, and I look forward to join you as long as I can today. Thank you.
I'm going to get my steps in, walking from my table up to this podium all day. I would like to introduce our first keynote speaker. Is everybody ready? Oh, we have a video, I'm sorry.
Which is sponsored by the Resource Conservation.
Which is sponsored by the Resource Conservation Group.
There's a couple different things that happen at a symposium. First of all, you get to show your work, and then you get to see other people's work, which expands your imagination and your vision. The relationships you make there are interesting because sometimes you're just so focused on what you're doing, you don't really think of the other things that you can do. I've developed relationships with people through this symposium that gave me access to new ideas, to new technologies, to new resources and funding. It helped me take projects that we wanted to do and to talk to, whether it was somebody from the EPA or from a consulting firm or another county department, to talk about the value of those projects.
The symposium is really a a priority for people throughout the county to come together and both to learn about what's happening and to celebrate and to network and to meet people, and also to put faces with names that you may have been emailing with over years and years.
I think the activity that I value the most with a symposium is the networking, and the fact that you get representatives from many different interests.
Symposium functions as a way to inspire and engage people, and I think everyone who goes to the symposium or participates in the symposium leaves with a renewed sense of energy about conservation work, about creeks, about watersheds, and at the symposium, lots of ideas are batted around. That is where we started to think about the Contra Costa County Watershed Atlas, pulling together the Volunteer Creek Monitoring Program, publications, developing historical ecology. All of these things came out of the Contra Costa Watershed Forum, which is the ultimate organizer of the symposium. So being inspired by volunteers, by other community groups, by other agencies who are engaged in this is a key component of the Watershed Symposium.
Let's inspire, let's show some examples of successes. Let's have some speakers out there that are doing things a little different, maybe a lot different than what we've traditionally done here in Contra Costa or in the Bay Area as a whole, and then try to rally both the public agencies such as my own, and also regulatory agencies and everybody else under the sun, and the private groups and the nonprofits to say, is there something that we can all hold up together and say, boy, they did it there.
I was involved in planning the first 4 events, and we always tried to have a diversity of topics, but the one that I think the most people remember was not because of the science or the policy or the techniques, it was the emotion. And that taught me a lot as somebody who works with partnerships, is that what really gets people's attention and gets people motivated is the inspiration. And it's really hard to find inspirational stories or speakers that can convey it. But I remember at, I think it was the 2003 symposium, we had a group of high school students and their teacher from Costa Grande High School in Petaluma talking about their fish hatchery project. And for a lot, I think there was sort of not a dry eye in the house, as I remember some people saying, because the kids were telling stories about how their work to try and restore their creek and to get salmon reared and reintroduced into that creek were something that basically changed their lives. And so it was a very inspirational story, and I think gave a lot of energy to the watershed groups in Contra Costa County.
I would describe it as kind of 2 primary issues, or I know we call them issues, but the things we're trying to achieve. Yeah. One is motivation, and the other is practical application. So, to be a watershed-based organization, which I belong to, over the years you struggle, sometimes mightily, to keep the organization going. There's all kinds of things that are, almost, you might say, dragging you down, but not really. But I mean, it's hard to keep it going. You have organizational capacity issues, you have funding issues, you're scrambling to make sure you have a watershed coordinator, because otherwise I get stuck doing the minutes and setting the agenda, which is not good. So there's all these things that it's a real chore to keep going. And to go to a symposium and to have some speaker get up and tell them how they did it, and how, some new idea that you hadn't thought of, and that you can take home and keep your group going, is huge. I mean, this whole motivation thing is inspirational. You're good for another 4 years until the next symposium. Then you need another shot of motivation, right?
But every 4 years, it just has this significance of saying, we could really look back and say, what have we done? In 4 years, you could look back and probably point to a few things and say, gee, that was a success. We did this. That's a huge milestone. And also then to think about the next 4 years of where can we be.
The best part about these videos is we get to see what Elise's search history is for the YouTubes. No, she's denying it. I'm joking. Yeah. All right, is everybody ready for our keynote speaker? All right, I'd like to introduce Obi Kaufman. Obi is an artist and naturalist who many of you, of course, know because his books grace your shelves. His first book, California Field Atlas, sat for months on the nonfiction bestseller lists and won multiple awards, including the Gold Medal Book Award from the Commonwealth Club and the Book of the Year. And his next work, The Forests of California, will be released by Heyday in the fall of 2020. When he agreed to be our keynote speaker, the symposium got a lot more real and a lot more exciting. Obi's presentation is Unity and Vision, an ecological tour of the Contra Costa County's future, and it ties into the legacy of the symposium in that we must not just look at what we've built, but look forward to the next 20 years and how we can look forward to that in the Contra Costa of tomorrow. So please join me in welcoming Obi Kaufman.
Well, good morning. All right, what a crew. I'm very grateful to Elisa and those at the Contra Costa County Resource Conservation District for inviting me here today to open this event. I entitled this address with the aptly vague and evocative title, Unity and Vision, an ecological tour of Contra Costa County's future, to capture in general my themes when I give talks to all levels of informed, uninformed, or ever increasingly misinformed communities around the state. And although I've learned to spit a good game, I myself regularly identify as being inside of one of those three camps, the informed, the uninformed, or the misinformed. I am Coyote. I'll spin a yarn, but I am outside of policy and I am outside of published science, and I am very clear and I am very sensitive to both of those positionings. My strengths these days come from my most general observations. For example, now to allude back to the title of this morning's address, I don't have a prophet's hold on how time will affect our shared local ecology, but I do know that its fate is tied to the larger living system, and I intentionally refer to it in the singular tense of California. Not the political identity, but probably more accurately, the floristic province by the same name. When I first was invited to give the keynote at this excellent event, I imagined developing kind of a quick overview of creek shed restoration projects or delving into the portfolio of projects currently underway across this place. I do have 40 years of personal experience adventuring in studying and painting Contra Costa County's backcountry. So I immediately got excited to get really nerdy about this advance or that innovation. And then I remembered who I was actually addressing, you all. I painted this map yesterday. A map that doesn't really exist as such anywhere online, at least that I could find. And I should say that this is arguably the most important vision of the county. Watercourses and watersheds. And I was researching all the good work that the CCCRD was doing, and I wouldn't say I got nervous. I've been talking about the natural world of California for a couple of years now since the California Field Atlas has become a bestseller, and I'm happy to talk all day about whatever issue to whatever community, but I would say that I took pause. It is the holiday season, and I've got family on my mind. We all do. The pause I was given yesterday when I sat down to make that map was I realized I was addressing family. There are so many of you here, soldiers in stewardship, priests of preservation, colonels of conservation, warriors of the watershed, who frankly know so much more than I do about everything that I could talk about. I knew that to speak to you here this morning, I should put down all my tools and just speak to my family. We are all family here today. And being in a family takes vulnerability to new ideas. Being in a family means that we work together. Being in a family means that we are dependent in a network of trust. Even if I don't know your name, I know that by being here today, I know that you know this place, that you identify this place as the place of your family. I know that you know this place as our common home, and I'm going to trust you with that concept, and I'm going to trust you with that love. I've got buckets of hope. As our systems get more efficient and we rely less on the extraction of our local and limited resources to sustain our growing population, we are watching a trend to greater opportunities in ecological stewardship and restoration. We are thrilled to witness modest yet growing populations of some of our most precious biodiverse species, including osprey, river otter, beaver, red-legged frogs, great horned owls, white-tailed kites, steelhead, and rainbow trout. The challenges are legion, but the opportunities rise up to meet them. When I wrote my second book, which is still on San Francisco Chronicle's bestseller list, The State of Water, Understanding California's Most Precious Resource, I had thought that what the subtitle referred to, California's Most Precious Resource, should be axiomatically water, the substance itself. It is not. Our most precious resource, and I've learned this through an evolution of my relationship to the greater human community of California that I've got to know on tour in support of this book and the last one, is our ability and willingness to trust one another with the story. That story is often boiled down to the interpretation of data based on personal or cultural bias. But I think, especially in relation to the natural world and our place in it, the better story, the one that requires the most trust, is how we better manage the balance of our rights versus our responsibilities. In modern society, a discussion of worldview often comes down to a discussion of freedom. There are different definitions of freedom. I believe that most of us operate under the largely false assumption that freedom is doing whatever you want. This is wrong. This is a child's definition of freedom. Freedom in a society is the agency to attend to your social responsibilities without a governmental entity telling you what those responsibilities are. With the accelerating momentum of so many stressors on our local ecology, how do we identify the most efficient way forward through the din of disunity to a collective vision of connectivity and restoration? One that will best ensure the legacy of our home region's rich natural world. We put our science-based strategies into place, we make them law, and we wait to enjoy their fruit. When I first started backpacking, it was in Big Sur, and it was in the 80s. I thought I had missed so much. I thought I was born too late. There were no condors. There were no whales. There were no otters. There were no tule elk. There were no white-tailed kites. Now all of these species are increasing in population. This is because of the right negotiation of legislation, science, responsibility, and love for family. When you're talking about water in California, you are not talking about water. You're talking about worldview. John Wesley Powell, our nation's first director of the USGS, was the first to declare that water will always dictate all aspects of life in the West, a declaration as prescient and indeed salient in 1861 as it will be in 2061. In the emerging era of rain bombs and snow drought, we will increasingly rely on our most innovative and nimble minds to not only do more with less, but ensure that the more we are talking about includes a plan for the more than human family we are actively engaged and beholden to a certain level of management through the foreseeable future. That future will be us doing our best to find the most adaptive and resilient systems of cohabitation within a larger network of biodiversity based on our responsibilities to each other in the face of a warming planet and a climate that is breaking old, reliable cycles. We are not going back. There is no reason why we need to give a single inch towards further degradation, as we are now engaged in new modes of urbanization and development that include conservation and preservation as core values, as necessary as shelter itself. There will be no going back. We will continue our remediation, and we will continue to forge a vision of entering the 22nd century with a more complex and healthier local ecosystem than the one we entered with at the start of the 21st century. It all begins with protecting the watershed, the circulatory system of the natural world. We're about to spend $1 billion to get another 100,000 acre feet out of Los Vaqueros Reservoir. And I have to say, of all the dams in California, I think I like Los Vaqueros as my favorite. I know that land well. There's a lot of quality habitat afforded that place, and I stand with the Nature Conservancy, Audubon, California, and Defenders of Wildlife in support of its expansion. I'm not anti-dam. I'm anti-dumb dam. And the illegal raising of Shasta Dam is one that I would put into that latter category, but maybe not for the reasons you think. There is a lot of money involved in keeping us divided. Divisiveness is so common, it is, well, like water. And there is a lot of money being made at keeping us separated in our agendas. North and south, urban and rural, blue and red, and even human and other than human. It is going to be hard work coming together, and we are finding in new arenas like social media that are deleterious to our finding common ground. But then it has always been difficult. Humans are very good at finding solutions to problems, and I would not bet against them. I find despair boring. Hope is so much more exciting. As long as there is time, there is hope. We have a miracle happening around us right now. And that miracle is that despite all of our efforts to milk California and to fundamentally transform its ecology to our own benefit, it is all still here. Despite every one of our several hundred natural landscape types being threatened or endangered, we have a very low extinction rate. Exactly 32 animal species in the past 170 years. That is less than 1% of our portfolio. There are no laurels to rest on. The reasons why species go extinct are very complex. And it seems as though many species are headed towards the extinction vortex. But the point is, they are all still here, and if there is time, there is hope. So let's call out our local family here today and celebrate their existence, and let's work to keep the trophic structure from cascading into a negative fall. Let's work for the fairy shrimp, the bald and the golden eagles, the Alameda whipsnake, the western pond turtle, the California tiger salamander, the California red-legged frog, the San Joaquin kit fox, and our friend, the San Francisco dusky footed wood rat, Neotoma fusipes. Let's acknowledge them in all of our work as being part of our family and deserving of habitat. And let's trust each other enough to have an inclusive conversation about the ecological health of Contra Costa County into the future. And I certainly give that to you gathered here today. The power is yours, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for rising to accept it. Thank you. That's it. All right, Symposium 2019. Yeah, good one, right on. Thank you, friends.
All right, one more time for Obi Kaufman. And just a reminder that if you have questions during our presentation, slido.com, and our access code is #symposium. So we had one question, it was, does this work? Yes, Abby, it works. I saw your question. All right, I'm turning it back over to Brendan.
You know, the best part about the app or the website Slido is you can actually look at your phone while someone's speaking and not feel guilty about it. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mitch Avalon. Mitch is the visionary behind the Flood Control District's 50-year plan. And the whole concept of that was to create a new idea of our local creeks serving multiple functions, not just as flood control channels, but creeks in their own right that provide habitat for critters and recreation opportunities and the like. Mitch, I guess you could say, is kind of the resident historian of the symposium, and he was a very early supporter, and he's part of what makes this a success. So please welcome Mitch as he gives us a tour of the history of the symposium.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So just an interesting side note here, or a question. I know you're going to ask me questions, but before you do that, I'm going to ask you a question. How many have been to or was at the first symposium in 1999? Raise your hands. All right, good amount. Very good, very good. All right. So has anybody mentioned that this is like our 20th anniversary of the symposium? I'd like to kind of go through a history of the symposium and the Watershed Forum, which kind of came out of the symposium, and why and how it's been sustainable and such a success over all these years. The Watershed Forum is, and you've heard a lot about this already, but it's really a place to collaborate. And if you can imagine the networking that goes on here and the collaboration every other month, an opportunity to do that, that's what the Watershed Forum offers to all of us. And we can share our stories. We can share the lessons learned. I like Obi's concept of story. Those stories are motivating, and they inspire everybody. And every other month, you can come to a Watershed Forum meeting, and you can hear what someone's doing in another watershed, and you go, wow, I got to do that in my watershed. So the Watershed Forum is a great thing that we have and resource in our county here. So I'm going to give you a little tour of the history and how we got to where we are today. So in the 1980s, it's, going back in time, there was kind of 3 groups out there that were kind of working on things. And as you see, when we get to the symposium, all these 3 groups kind of came together. And we had the County Water Agency as for one group. And the County Water Agency is kind of this sleepy agency that not many people know about. It's housed in the planning department in the county. Their bread and butter
for many years was navigation projects. So they worked with the Army Corps of Engineers to develop a channel, a shipping channel, to go up to Stockton, and that would be beneficial for the economy of the county. They also worked on water policy, and of course this is during the days of the Peripheral Canal and the Delta with water wars, and they're out in the thick of that. So this was their kind of bread and butter. And then on the county, the flood control district has been, Supervisor Anderson mentioned that we were charged with getting water through the community and protecting the community from flooding, which we did a very, very good job of, and we allowed development to proceed, and the economies of our communities prospered, which is all good. But there was an impact to all that great work that the flood control district did, and the environment suffered. We didn't really think about it at the time, but it was a traditional approach of concrete channels and no vegetation. That was kind of the byword. In fact, the flood control district was a sponsor of Army Corps projects. They required us not to have any vegetation in our maintenance manuals. And then the third group were these creek groups, and these are citizens, all of us here in this room, that were interested in, wait a minute, there was this awakening and interest in, we've lost our creeks. We need to, this is wrong. First of all, acknowledgement that there's something going on here that we need to change because we don't like what has happened. We don't want any more of this to happen, and we need to do some things differently. So there's this awakening in the citizenry, and then there is an organization around watersheds. So you had the Friends of Five Creeks, the Friends of Pinole Creek, the Friends of a lot of creeks in Contra Costa County. And they were concerned about the way that the creek improvements, as the flood control district would say, we're going to come in and improve your creek. They were concerned about the way that was designed. So in going to the 80s to the 90s now, again, looking at these three groups, because they are going to converge, the water agency suddenly had this interest in watersheds because John Kopchik was an intern, student intern, that was brought into the planning department, and like every intern that's brought into any department, they run out to the back of the room there and they clear off this desk of Christmas ornaments and decorations that they had stored there, and here you go, good luck. Oh, and here's our manual for whatever they have them to work on. And like some interns, they didn't give John a full-time job, so John had some time on his hands, and John is passionate about watersheds. So not suddenly, but over time, the water agency kind of develops this kind of watershed awareness and a nascent program to help watersheds. And then the flood control district is at the beginning of the Titanic shifting, and there was this Wildcat Creek project, which was another core project, the standard kind of design that looks like this on the right there. And you can see, does this have a pointer? Yeah, you see, here's Las Trampas Creek here, where all the trees are. That's what the old creek is. And then the new improved creek, which is all riprap and concrete. So the citizens in West County, seeing what the creeks have looked like and that have been improved, and the flood control district with the core, it's really the core design, they looked at that and said, whoa, we need to do something different. So they protested, advocated for a different design. They came before our Board of Supervisors, and there was a point in time where our board said, okay, we need to take another look at this. Let's stop everything and take a look at what we're doing here. And they created this, what was called the design team. And the design team was made up of some of the active citizens. There was a citizen advisory group out there. They took some of the local citizens. They had the core, the flood control district, planners. They had everybody, and they said, go into a room and figure it out. And they came up with a consensus design, which was what you see today. And at that project that was built, it was built as a flood control project. It worked to provide flood protection, but it has a lot of riparian habitat and great environment along the creek. And that is actually held up for like the last 20 years. It's been held up as a national example of how to do an environmentally friendly flood control project. National example. The court actually trots that one out. The other group that these creek groups in, suddenly they see a success with the Wildcat Creek project, that they're able to make some changes in the flood control district. And the design team turns into the San Pablo Wildcat Creek Watershed Council. And there's some there with these creek groups. So they approached the Board of Supervisors, who is the governing board of the flood control district, and they want to have more changes they like what they see with Wildcat. They want to make more changes with the way the flood control district does business. Well, as it turns out, one of those timing things, I guess, in life, I was on loan to the planning department for a year, right around this time, and the planning director calls me in his office and says, yeah, we've got this report from the board. It's about flood control stuff. You're from Public Works. Why don't you go down to this committee meeting and deal with it? So I go down to this board committee meeting, and the place is packed. You have the board members at a table, and there's Ann Riley talking about how they want to, very tactfully, how what the flood control district could be changed and things would be better, and how things would be better. And then there's all the flood control folks over there looking rather dour, and things worked out. In the long run, it all worked out. And it wouldn't have worked out if it hadn't been for that pressure that was put on. And that's part of the story today with why this all works. Because that all kind of, those three groups kind of coming together to form the first symposium in 1999. Well, nothing ever happens, as we know, in life unless you put resources to it. That's if you're planning a vacation or you're planning a symposium. It's all the same. You got to put resources to it. The county water agency was willing, really, John Kopchak, he's the driver. The symposium would not have happened without John Kopchak. He did all of the work to plan this symposium. But where did the initial idea come from? Well, there's a county fish and wildlife committee that's been around for a long time. They deal with dispersing the fines that are collected from the fish and wildlife, or the fish and game. No, fish and wildlife now, sorry. And the committee, they were seeing, excuse me, they were seeing this, a lot of work going around the county, and they were concerned that there wasn't collaboration and there wasn't some way of organizing all this stuff so it all kind of made sense. There's a lot of things going on, but there was nothing that was kind of holding it together, an overview. And they thought, maybe we should get everybody together and talk about things so we can do things better. And the idea of a symposium was brought forward by this committee, and that was kind of the vision that got it going. So the committee put together a planning committee, as we always have to do in order to get something going. And John was in charge of that. And about a year later, we have the symposium. The symposium was, again, the flood control district with the Titanic moving. Well, the flood control district had been moving all this time, ever so slowly, and timing is everything. And the flood control district was ready to kind of lay out its vision for change in the district. And it was called, in the 50-year plan, which was alluded to earlier, and it really laid out kind of at a very high concept level vision for the flood control district to remove, ultimately, concrete channels because they only last so long. They have to be replaced when they wear out. And when they wear out, what should we replace them with? Well, that's up to the communities, and we're offering, the flood control district says, to put in a natural creek channel if we all work together and plan it. So that was the flood control district's kind of vision at this symposium. The creek groups made this all work because you need those volunteers and energy to make something happen. And you have to have that push that people are willing to go out and say, you got to come to the symposium, it's going to be great. And it was great. Then, after the symposium, everybody was giddy. We're just giddy with excitement. Woo, we got to do things. Let's go out and change the world. You know, it lasts, not a long time, but it's good when it lasts, It's all great. And the committee got together to debrief the symposium. And it's like, wow, man, that was so good. We got to keep this thing going. We got to keep this energy going. And they formed, they decided that what can we do to keep it going? So the idea was, well, let's meet every other month. And we'll call it the Watershed Forum. So that was what created the Watershed Forum. It's the planning group who is folks that are just, have that passion, like John Kopchik, and to keep this thing going. And again, and all these things are important, but I'll just focus on a couple of them. The staff support is key. And if you don't have a watershed coordinator for your friends of the creek group or your watershed council, it's very, very difficult. You need that support, that administrative support to keep things going. And one of the things that's unfortunate these days is there's not enough funding out there for watershed coordinator work and to support the good work that everybody here is doing. The other thing I want to mention is rebels become builders. When rebels tear the walls down, sometimes they just want to keep tearing walls down, and because that's what that was their vision is done. And the reason why, in part, this group has continued to be successful is because those rebels who tore down the walls turned to rebuild them in a way that everybody was envisioning. So they didn't become obstructors. They became inclusive builders of this Watershed Forum and Symposium. And the Contra Across the Creeks Coalition was a group that was formed that went to the Board of Supervisors and requested the flood control change their business practices. That group, after the Watershed Forum, just kind of fizzled because that opposition they felt wasn't necessary, which meant that this whole thing was a success. And about 2 years after the first symposium, the flood control district was giving Ann Riley a tour of the San Ramon Creek and all the projects that flood control had envisioned in Walnut Creek. She said, these projects are great. She said, this is the same woman who was speaking to the Board of Supervisors to change the flood control district business practices. 2 years later, she says, I'm going to advocate in Congress for your projects. That's the difference between the rebels and the builders. And that's why we've been successful. But of course, success takes commitment. And vision is what it's all about. We all have to have that rallying cry that makes us get up in the morning and go to a meeting and go out there into the watershed and pull weeds and plant plugs to give the natives a chance, or take out a rundo. This work. You got to roll up your sleeve, get your hands dirty. This isn't behind the desk kind of work. And it takes support at many, many levels. And our Board of Supervisors has always provided very strong support for the efforts we have done. And in the beginning, John Kopchik would write these board orders. He didn't have any funding. I mean, the planning, the water agency has very little funding, but he would send the board order through, and somehow he got some money out of the navigation side of the house there, and it all worked out. But the institutional support, again, John supported, and the planning department supported the Watershed Forum and the symposiums for like 10 years after the first symposium. Every other month, you got to plan another meeting. It was a lot of work. And then the flood control district took it over. Mike Carlson was heading up the flood control district at the time. And then the flood control contracted with the resource conservation district, and now Lisa's doing the work. But that continuity has been very key in making sure that this thing is successful. But it's all of you out there, the community, that has to push this vision, and it has to be pushed at two levels. You have to push the politicians, the elected officials, because you have to have support from the top. And we're lucky we have support at the top. Our board has always been supportive. But you have to push on the city councils also, and you got to keep pushing the board too, because people change. So you got to keep the pressure on, and then you have to push that vision institutionally, which is the organizations. You know, you got to keep pushing flood control. Got to keep pushing the water agency. You know, people change. It's good to keep it's maybe poor partnerships today, but it's still a bit of a push there. But one thing that's critical too is to have, you know, people support organizations that actually do something and produce something that's cool. The Watershed Atlas was really cool, and the historical ecology was like eye-popping. It's just, this is good stuff. We got to maintain, you know, we have to keep these projects going. So somehow we got to come up with another project. Maybe we'll update the Atlas. Where's Abby? Yeah. So what's the future look like? Well, I'm really grateful to see a lot of young people here, because we really have to engage youth. You know, I've been at it for 20 years with the symposium, the Watershed Forum. Yeah, I'm ready, and I need to pass it on to the next generation. We have to engage the youth so we have that next generation to pass it on to. We need to stay relevant, and one of the organizational structures, the element of the Watershed Symposium Forum, is to have an executive committee which is open to anybody. Everybody in this room can go to executive committee meeting, and that group sets the agenda for the next meeting. So that keeps it relevant, because you're always bringing in new blood and new ideas. It's great. And then the round table is, which is at every meeting, go around the table and talk about what you're doing. That's really stimulating and motivational also. But you got to continue to push the vision. Every one of us here has to continue to push that vision. You know, we want to have a healthier watershed. We want creeks that can sustain native species. You know, it's not easy. It's hard work, and it takes a lot of time, but we got to keep everybody engaged. And you do that by kind of pushing. And we got to do big things like projects like the Watershed Atlas and the historical ecology. Those are things that keep us together. You know, it's a project. You know, nothing binds us together like a project that we're all working on. The Watershed Forum really establishes a culture in our county. And I would say that if you compare Contra Costa to some other county, all things being equal, we have been more successful at creek restoration and improving watershed health than other counties, because we have this Watershed Forum. This is our culture as a county, and that is very, very important. It also provides us a space to refine our vision. Everything changes with time. We have to respond to that, and we can do that every other month at a Watershed Forum meeting. So I like Obi's concept of the soldiering in the creeks and the warriors of the watershed. So you keep a little bit of that rebel going, but be friends and partners to everybody in the flood control district too. So I would just like to give a shout out to all the heroes out there. When this first got started back in 1999, and when I was talking about the early 80s and 90s, all these people, they're pioneers, and there's a lot of them here today that formed these creek groups. the Friends of Marsh Creek, the Friends of Pinole Creek, and the Wildcats, San Pablo Creek's Watershed Council, all these citizens that stood up and formed these. It takes a lot of courage to do that and to pull everybody together. So those warriors of the watershed, I want to salute them. And this is a picture of Jim Hale, one of our heroes, watershed heroes, that pulling salmon out of Walnut Creek Channel. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mitch. I wanted, if you were paying attention, you might know the answer to this question. So we're going to honor the Slido question that we have, and that is, what anniversary of the symposium is this one? Right.
Yes. What is it?
Well, I'm not the expert.
Okay.
1999, so I'm not a math
20
major.
years.
Okay, 20 years. But I'd encourage you for the next speakers.
That question was easy enough. I'll take another.
Is
I
it?
can handle these questions.
Anyone have any questions for Mitch besides what we did online? I guess you must have covered it all. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, here's the plan. We're going to take a 20-minute break. There are refreshments and artwork and a lot of good information in the back. So we'd urge you to check out Obie Kaufman's work along with work from the River of Words. And we're going to be back here in 20 minutes. We're going to have an award ceremony and then a talk by local artist John Finger. Thanks, everybody.